Also, totally forgot to record, so I guess I'm starting recording now. Great. Uh,
We just talked about this.
yeah, I know. It's gonna happen every time. All right. No, don't, don't do that.
Screen.
All right. Think about pillars, right? We have game pillars. Ignore the
Hmm.
right. Just listen to my words. Don't try to read it. You have game pillars, right? And then that's things like what are the most important things to our game? We might have story as a game pillar. We might have um, we might have challenge, not difficulty, but challenge.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
So there's a difference there, but this is sort of like game pillars are kind of like what are the main three ways we want the gameplay to feel, or we want the game overall to feel. So like, in fact, we'd even be more specific with story. We'd probably say something like, uh, let's say like tragedy,
Tragedy? Oh.
whatever we're dealing, whatever story you want, a story that tells, a story that explores this idea would be a pillar. Like one of our pillars of the game is that a story. I'm working with I'm working with a studio called Luna Game Labs, and they have a bunch of mental health experts, and they're trying to make a game that is sort of true to the experience of mental health issues. And I just had a meeting with them. This was my meeting with them yesterday. Um, and I'm trying to help them constrain their scope and focus on what they're doing. And one of the big problems that I noticed was that they have these ideas of like, oh, they were like, we want people to understand what it's like to sort of support people with mental health issues, but also we want people to understand what it's like to be a person with mental health issues. And one of the things I told them was like, pick one. Pick one. If you try to do both things, you're going to do neither thing, right? Like focus, 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 focus. It's the same advice I've been sort of hammering here. Focus on a thing. And it's really, really important to do that. So one of their pillars would be something like, for example, we want the experience of insert mental health issue to be well represented in some specific way. That would be one of their gameplay, one of their high level game pillars, right? That's like one of the core reasons that they're making this game. They want that. So that would be a high level pillar. In fact, it's probably their highest pillar, their number one pillar. It would be right at the top here. So that's what gameplay pillars are. But I'm going to shorthand this into something like story, challenge, and replayability. Let's say replayability. And then we have challenge. Well, where does the challenge come from? Well, the challenge comes from combat, exploration, and in our case, platforming. These are obviously not the same game anymore, but just to illustrate this. And these are our gameplay pillars. Right? These are our game pillars, and these are our gameplay pillars. And then we would have this, and we have our story pillars. And then that's whatever our story pillars are. And then we have platforming, and we have our platforming pillars. We have our feature pillars for platforming. We have our feature pillars for exploration, and we have our feature pillars for combat. And through this process, we slowly explicate out what this game is and why it's unique and distinct. No game will have this combination of like things. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like we have these high level pillars, and then we have the sub pillars of that, and then the sub pillars of the gameplay. Then platforming has pillars of its own. And then if these are big features for whatever reason, those might have pillars of their own. Or they might be small enough that we're done there. So when we're talking about pillars, we're talking about so with Hollow Knight, we're here. We're not worried about all the rest of the stuff. Does it exist? Of course. Is it important? Of course. If it's a high priority game pillar, of course it's important. It's crucial. It's vital. But we're only going to focus on gameplay pillars. Right? So we have combat, exploration, and platforming. So the question about difficulty is, where does difficulty go? Probably in combat. How
Yeah.
important is difficulty to the combat? Well, maybe challenge goes here. Why? We want it to be challenging, but then we have to answer the question of why we want it to be challenging. And one of the reasons that we want it to be challenging, you know what? Think about the other. Okay, let's do it this way. We have the gameplay pillars. I'm gonna abbreviate things. We have combat. We have platforming.
Wouldn't like
Exploration.
platforming also be in a sense kind of on the challenging esque part of it? Like depending on the situation when you're doing it, like depending on what it is, there's like challenging parts to it.
Well, it depends. So we're gonna have like all these sub pillars, right? So we're gonna have combat, we're gonna have platforming, and we're gonna have exploration. So maybe
Yeah.
challenge is here, but when we put it here, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we want challenge to be a core component of platforming? Remember we were talking about prioritization. It's not do we want it there or not. This isn't a binary decision of like, is platforming ever challenging or never challenging? This is, or always versus never. This is about, is it part of the core experience of platforming overall? And by the way, what makes, in order to make, okay, we talk sometimes about like how we want systems to interact with each other. Oh, we want like a game to be coherent, overall, holistically coherent and cohesive. And we want one system to work with other systems, and we want to understand how a system interacts with mechanics. But these are all really vague, abstract ideas, right? What does it mean for a system to interact with another system? Well, in theory, on paper, it looks like this. We want challenge, if we wanted challenge to be a core component of platforming, how would we do that?
Maybe.
You make it more intense in a sense.
What does that mean?
I guess
Yeah, it
in like
doesn't.
story wise, like when you're platforming and like you're say you're trying to run, say like you're on a chase, and it has to do with platforming. So like in the intense wise for like challenging things, you have to like go past obstacles and
What kind
I'm.
of obstacles?
more difficult, like
I'd say
spikes or enemies after you or like
Hold on. What was that?
traps in general.
Using
Enemies
enemies?
after. Yes.
That seems economical to me. Why? Because we have combat already. So how do we make platforming more challenging? We use combat. Why? Because that means that in order to make combat more challenging, we can use platforming. Now they're connected.
I don't know if I'm misremembering. Remember. I don't know if it was you. I believe it was you that said one of the things about challenging a game is it could be a relatively simple thing, but make the player think they overcame something.
Yes,
So
that's
what I would. So
certainly
what I.
important.
So what. So just a quick example I thought is maybe you have to jump between platform to platform. Well, I don't know if this is in the game, but a wall of spikes is coming at you from one side, and you need to hop from platform to platform. And let's say you're at top speed. At all you would really need to do is press the button in the right rhythm, which isn't too hard, but it's really intense, so would feel like a challenging segment.
Okay, so we're
That's
actually going to be
something you
able to
could do.
break this down into more categories. We're going to do subcategories again. Because now we're going to start saying what categories of platforming are there? Well, there's platforming that comes from, I'm going to use letters to make this much easier. We're going to use C, P,
Yeah.
and E. So we have platforming challenges. We have platforming combat challenges. I'm going to say we have combat platforming challenges. Then we have platforming exploration challenges. Then we have exploration platforming challenges. So what's a platforming challenge? Well, platforming challenge might be things like timing, precision movement. Is there anything else that would be just platforming challenge, no exploration, and no combat at all, other than timing and precision movement?
You could have pretty small platforms and a not guaranteed death, but decent size setback if you were to miss.
Well, so that would be precision movement, right?
Oh, is that no? Okay, yeah, that's not what we said. I guess not. I guess that's what makes the combat in Hollow Knight interesting, is all the
The
elements
platforming.
together.
That's what makes that's platforming. That's platforming only, right? Timing and precision movement. So what would precision plus or what would platforming plus combat be? What makes up platforming plus combat?
I guess wouldn't timing also kind of correspond with platforming combat as well, though?
Yeah, because it includes platforming. So actually, precision movement
Both for precision and movement as well.
both apply here, but they apply in different ways, right?
Timing in like landing your attacks and invading
now
movements.
Now we also have moving. Let's say avoiding enemies. Let's say avoiding attacks. It makes sense that platforming plus combat would include all of the things from platforming, because it includes platforming. Yeah. But we also add avoiding attacks. So we've added a new layer, right? We're just like layering a third thing on top of platforming. You now have to also avoid attacks. And sometimes make attacks. But not always. You can actually just get around some enemies.
Parrying as well would technically be part, well, at least for because I have seen in the Hollow Knight you can parry attacks. So like
parrying is a method of avoiding attacks.
I guess fair enough.
Cool. Let's talk about combat plus platforming the other way around. So what would it be if we have platforming combat, and that's like platforming with combat layered on? What's the difference between that and combat with platforming layered on?
I know we're not talking about this game. I just played I haven't finished it, but one of the big things in Donkey Kong Bonanza was because of the way that game is made, a lot of the enemies were made of solid ground you could walk on. So if they're large enemies, you could walk on the enemies, and a lot of you're in a fight and there's a health bar and you're dodging attacks, and that's the main idea. But finding opportunities to climb onto the enemy and then get to the top, deal damage to a weak
but
point.
we're not trying to design a game. We're describing Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight. Okay, yeah, Hollow Knight only. Okay. I was just thinking that's an example of combat plus platforming.
Oh, there's a million examples out there.
Yeah.
We're describing.
Sorry, it's a little. Yeah.
If we're talking about Hollow Knight,
well, so
usually when you're attacking an enemy, they will be pushed, or you get pushed away from them, or like you can like jump above them, hit downwards, and you pogo off of them.
Well, that's a mechanic, but how does that fit into these like this high level? We're sort of doing high level categorization of like the kinds of things you can do in Hollow Knight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all those mechanics that you're mentioning, those fit into these categories. Those are all just like different combinations of these elements. Right. That's the cool part about this. So we're going top down here. We're going from the high level and working downward into those specifics. Whereas if you start with the mechanics, you would probably also come to similar conclusions about like, oh, they all like work in similar categories. But to my mind, when I think Hollow Knight and what the difference between platforming with the layer of combat challenge on top of that versus a combat challenge with platforming on top of it, my first thought is that this is like an overworld situation and this is a boss fight. Because
okay.
And those are defined. The way I think about it, or the way that I would think about it, is that okay, these are defined by player expectation and player goal. So if we lock you in a space with a room and you can't get out of that room until the boss is dead, or you die, we've given you a very clear objective, right? Very unambiguous objective. Kill this boss. So now your objective is kill an enemy. Whereas here, your objective is to get places. And so killing enemies may or may not factor into that in various ways, but because your objective is really to get places, the fights only serve as obstacles to that objective. Whereas in a boss fight, platforming is the obstacle and combat is the objective, which changes how it feels. The conclusion here is hilariously trivial. It's like trivially obvious, which is platforming in the overworld feels different from doing a boss fight. Which of course it does. Sure. But that's a really good thing for our purposes, because what that means is that we were able to work down to a clearly true conclusion. And that means that our process is probably pretty good. And so that means, so if you look back at our process, what was that? Well, we started categorizing things in this way. From the pillars, the gameplay pillars specifically, we broke the gameplay pillars down to combat, platforming, and exploration. These are the 3 pillars of Hollow Knight. Then we just started defining what makes combat feel like combat. Well, we didn't do that yet. We've been doing platforming. What makes platforming feel like platforming? Well, because we know the 3 pillars, we really just have to ask, how do those pillars interact? So I wrote this little table. Well, here's the permutations of interaction. You can have platforming, platforming combat, platforming exploration. Is there a difference between platforming combat and combat platforming? Well, I was able to come up with a pretty good answer to that question, I think. And the reason I know that it's a pretty good answer is because they do, in fact, feel different. And if they feel different, they're different. So what I'm trying to illustrate here basically is that there is a process by which you can design Hollow Knight from scratch without having prior knowledge of Hollow Knight. Because this process can be extracted from this context and applied to whatever you're trying to make. So the more clearly you can visualize the game you're trying to make, the easier this process is, but at the same time, going through this process is part of clarifying and solidifying that vision. Both things. This is why writing is such an important part of being a designer, because writing and thinking are the same thing. Thinking is actually, in fact, writing is more thinking than thinking. Because when you think about what thinking is, you think about like, I'm going to sit here and like play with ideas or just like talk or whatever. But writing is the process of forcing yourself to put down what you are thinking. And if you can't do that in a way that's clear and concise, what that tells me, what that should tell you, is that your thinking isn't as clear as it needs to be. It could be clearer. And what you want is the clearest thoughts that you can possibly make. Thinking is a skill that you have to develop. And this is the thing that most people miss, is they think that thinking is a thing that smart people do. Nope. Thinking is a skill that you develop. And you develop it by writing. Now, you could also develop it through diagrams. It doesn't have to be writing. And here's what I mean by it doesn't have to be writing. If we're designing Hollow Knight, one of the things we can do is you have a screen. On that screen, you have a platform. Here's the thing, and then there's like a platform, and let's say you're down here. Have some platforms. And on this platform, there's like a little horrible fly that you hate. In fact, give him angry eyes because he's a bad guy.
Good.
And then down here you have the Hollow Knight, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're talking about platforming. What does that mean? Well, one thing it means is that you can run around. Another thing it means is that you can jump up here and jump up here. Another thing that means is that you can jump up here and deal with this enemy. That's annoying, right? How do we deal with that? Well, the enemy moves around. So let me color to show this, to show movement. So the enemy moves around like this and has, let's say it has an aggro radius of about this. And so when you enter the aggro radius, it just starts following you. So here's what I would do. Lorem ipsum, thank you. Please. Bigger, please.
Sometimes you can
Why?
find lorem ipsum on random graphics on like cereal boxes and stuff.
Yeah, it's a standard in graphic design
I know, I
you use
find it
lorem
funny.
ipsum for
It's a
placeholder for like
placeholder.
everything. It's like the standard placeholder. So sometimes it's just places. So we have a fly enemy. And what does it do? Has aggro radius. When player enters radius, enters radius, fly begins to chase player. Fly chases player to max radius. And max radius needs to be defined, so let me define that with some other color. No. No. That's our max radius. Wow, I want the text to be legible, thanks. Fly dies. Fly has 6 HP. Fly has no attacks. Fly deals 1 damage to player on collision. And before being aggroed, Fly has a simple left-right pattern. Okay. So what I've done here, everything that I've done here is the job of a designer. All of the things that I've just done, this would be your job as a designer. You have to design an enemy. In fact, you have to design a segment, which includes an enemy. Well, here's the enemy design for this segment, or the initial enemy design, basically, which is this. Why did I design the enemy this way?
Um, why with all the writing and text, so it's easy for artists or
Well, okay. Well, I'm
anyone,
communicating.
other designers.
I mean, why did I design? Why did I make it this design?
So it was simple.
It is simple. Okay, that's important in Hollow Knight. It's important for enemy designs to be simple. That's part of it. That's one of the things I've wanted, was a simple enemy. That's one thing.
Um,
It's relevant
it's
to this conversation. That's
it can be added to other elements of the game. You can add the
Modular.
fly pretty easy to a combat to a not to a you can add the fly to a platforming mission fairly
It's
easily.
it's simple and
Relatively.
highly modular. Great. Both important elements. Yeah.
Use as a simple obstacle.
It can be used as a simple obstacle. In what way is it an obstacle?
Because it's in the way of the platform that you're trying to get on.
Okay, but it's unique from other kinds of obstacles. In what way? An enemy, I should say, is unique to other kind of obstacles in some capacity. What is that?
It fights back.
It can, although in this case it actually doesn't. It just kind of comes at you. It doesn't have any attacks.
It's more so that it chases. It makes chase. It has like a radius before
It chases you
aggroes.
to a limit, right? It has HP. Why did I give it HP?
So
So you
can
can attack it.
So I can attack it. Why would a player want to attack it?
to get rid of it.
So you can get into the platform.
So what's the difference between an enemy and a different kind of obstacle?
So it'll try to attack you.
It's removable
Enemy.
Oh.
Yeah.
and it respawns. I can use combat to solve my problem. There's an obstacle that causes a problem. I cannot use combat to solve this problem, right? Can't use combat to solve this problem.
No.
I can use combat to solve this problem. So it justifies the combat system a little bit because and it justifies the combat system. Everything that uses the combat system justifies it. So if I use the combat system in a whole bunch of ways, that justifies that system more strongly than if I use it in one way ever. So in this case, I have an enemy that you can remove. It's a simple obstacle. You can remove it. You can remove it by attacking it. And while you attack it, there's a little bit of threat because you also have a health bar and so forth, right? It deals 1 damage to you on collision, and it has no attacks to make it nice and simple. However, there is another solution to this problem, to this platforming problem overall. What is it?
You could avoid it.
Well, think Hollow Knight generally. Like, what's something that you could get in Hollow Knight that would help you solve this problem? That would allow you to. That would be an alternate solution to using combat to solving this problem.
Okay, somebody
Does
plays
Hollow
the
Knight
game.
have like a ranged weapon? Does Hollow Knight have like ranged?
Well, that
attack?
would still be combat.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Environment.
What if I
Using it as a platform.
What if I jumped
use the enemy
here?
as a platform?
then jumped here, then double jumped?
Make your way. Oh yeah. You can make your way to the other platform.
This requires a
Instead of-
double jump, which you collect later. So now exploration also solves this problem, making the enemy obsolete once you get double jump, which is a great way of making it feel like you're progressing. You get to some early. Now all I need. Okay, so now all I need is for players to come back to this location at some point. Right?
Have like an award at the end.
So if I
Have something
want it to make
different?
it, because if I want you to feel a sense of progression, and you deal with this without double jump, you have to do this stupid annoying fly, and I make the fly annoying. It comes right at you, and you gotta, it's annoying. It's an annoying, stupid fly, and I want it to be kind of annoying. And the reason I want it to be a little bit annoying is because I want you to feel that much better about not having to deal with the dumbass fly, so that the double jump feels really good. But that means that I need you to come back here with the double jump, which means I need to give you a reason to come back here with the double jump. So how can we give the player a reason to come back here with the double jump?
You again, I don't know how Hollow Knight is laid out, but what you could do is you need to pass by this area in a hallway type area. The double jump ability, I don't know if it's a pair of shoes or something, I don't know. And you grab that in order to, like, it's a dead end. So you need to come back through this room to go literally anywhere else ever. That could be a possibility.
Well, we could
Should
do it.
work.
But this is actually, this is a bit of a theme I'm detecting. You could force the player to come back through this room, but we don't want to force them. We want to encourage them. How do we encourage them to come back through this room?
It's like a reward, or like maybe like a chess. Then
Okay, we could give
Or
them
like-
some kind of reward. How would we do that?
By
there's like a,
making it, you need the double jump to get to it.
How would we do
Yeah.
that? Here, let's.
there's like a maybe there's like a chest above it.
Maybe.
Yeah, like
another
a-
area.
Let's
or like
expand this
an area
area.
up top.
This is where the screen currently is in our example. But of course, in the Hollow Knight, the map extends far beyond that. So let's just say this is where the actual player screen is, but we can now extend this out
Right.
to something.
There's
Okay.
something higher above that requires the double jump.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we need like something like this, right?
Mhm.
Because hold on, let me do that differently. Because we want you to be able to get through here without the double jump, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's this path, right? But then we can do this, right?
Mhm.
Let me put a
It's
little
like a
goodie
double
up
jump.
here. And we make it and we place it here so that when you jump here, the screen shows you this area. Well, I guess more like this area. So that you get
Yeah.
here and you see a thing that you can't yet get, and you also see the way you're supposed to go.
Mhm.
So now we've created a fun little thing. We've hinted at, we've sort of foreshadowed the future. We've given a fun thing, a cool reward, making you feel good for coming back with the double jump, which makes you feel like you've progressed, because now when you come back with the double jump, not only do you get the new thing, you also don't have to deal with this stupid fucking fly that you probably hate at this point.
Something
Right.
tells me you're the one. Something tells me you're the one who hates the fly.
No, but no, it's because
There is
it's
tons
because
of annoying flies in Hollow Knight. I can agree
right,
with
but
that.
what I'm trying to illustrate is that visceral I hate these flies is an important part of the design.
Yeah.
Right? It's actually important that I make you hate the fly. So now we have a bunch of specific things. We want the fly to be simple. We want it to be modular. We want it to be kind of obnoxious. So we might even make this platform like really tiny. You know, because that way the fly is even more of a nuisance.
That
And-
sounds about right.
And we do all those things to make it. We even give you something over here to give you like a little bit of like, ooh, what's over here? And it's like nothing. So it's just like slightly disappointing. That way we contrast the, ooh, I want that. But then you progress and you have to come back with the double jump. And this is what's at the heart of a Metroidvania's exploration, which is that sense of, oh, now that I have this ability, I can go back and get all these things that I couldn't get before, right? Like that's really important to a Metroidvania. So this is how level design works. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is, remember how our beginning was, what are the pillars? Right?
Yeah.
High level, what are the game pillars? Then we started breaking these down into different things and identifying how they could interact with one another. Because we want to be economical with our design and make sure all of the systems are well justified, which means they need to justify each other. Right?
Mhm.
Then we came up with some stuff, and then the reason it started this was I wanted to make, because we just did this this idea of platforming challenge or platforming combat challenge as opposed to combat platforming challenge, which would probably be something more like a boss fight. What would a platforming combat challenge actually look like? What's an example of what we actually mean by a platforming challenge that utilizes combat as part of the experience of doing that platforming challenge? And then all this other stuff came down to, well, I also want to incorporate other elements. I want to incorporate exploration. I want to incorporate platforming exploration specifically. I want to incorporate platforming individually, and I want to incorporate combat, but only in the context of platforming. So that's how we go from this. It's sort of an illustration of how you go from the highest level of here's my concept to here are the pillars of my game, high level pillars, all the way down to where my platforms should be placed and how even with respect to how wide this platform was mattered. Like that was one of my things. I wanted this fly to be annoying. One of my solutions for making the fly really annoying was to make this platform super tiny, so it's fucking annoying to land on. And the fly is even more obnoxious. Because I want this moment to be really annoying. I want it to be really annoying. So that the rest of it feels way better by comparison. You're like, oh my god, I got through it. Now I never have to deal with this stupid fly ever again. And by the way, with Hollow Knight, I gave the fly 6 HP. If your nail at the very beginning does 1 damage per hit, you can come back when you do 3 damage per hit and 3-shot it, or 2-shot it rather. And that feels good too, because it's just like much easier to deal with. So you have all these avenues. Like, does that make sense? Do you see how much is condensed into that like one screen of gameplay? That's where I want your heads to be at ultimately, because that's where I want your heads to be at when you're deciding small, low-level things like this. But I also really, in the context of this class of game ideation, I want you to understand the relationship between these high-level concepts and how it slowly like trickles down into making these tiny decisions. And it's the importance of understanding your game at a higher level. And so when we talk about things like I need the systems to interact, or I want the mechanic to work with the systems that exist, that means a real thing, a real practical technical thing that as a game designer you have to sit down and figure out. And this kind of paper design with like, here's how the fly works, and there's a justification, a design justification for every single reason, every single thing the fly has and doesn't have. Why didn't I give the fly an attack?
Because that's not its goal. Its goal is just being an annoying little prick you have to deal with. It's
right. If we want it to be simple, that pretty much does the job. It's simple and annoying. Done. Also, if we made it more complex, we might run into a situation where we made the combat more complex, but that means that now once you have the things that you have later, the fight's no longer trivialized. And if we wanted you to be able to essentially trivialize this fight by having a double jump, or trivialize the challenge here by having a double jump to give you a sense of progression, well, if this fly has like a ranged attack, it might nick you while you're jumping. And now the fly's annoying again. But we want the fly to not be annoying now, because that's what makes it feel, that difference is what makes it feel like there's progression, right? We don't want the fly to have an attack. We could make it more complex, but actually simple is better in this case. Just want it to be simple. It accomplishes its goal. This is another thing that people will say a lot, is they'll say like, well, I think this design should accomplish the goal that we have for this fly. What goals? What goals do you have for that fly? Well, if you asked me that question in the context of this design, I would be able to give you a list of reasons, a list of goals that I need the fly to achieve, and how that fits into the rest of the design. And that all stemmed from this idea. All stemmed from this like high level to low level thinking. Now, don't get me wrong. One thing that's important to remember here is if you're stuck on the high level, one thing that you can do, sit down and draw out something like this and start trying to justify the gameplay. Let me give you a little secret. I did not put this at a higher level because I'm so brilliant and thought of double jumping right away. This was a completely arbitrary placement. I just put a second platform in because I was like, well, you need a place to jump from.
Mm-hmm.
You need a place to go from the fly. So like, let's add a platform. I didn't really think about it. Then later I started thinking like, well, what's more value I can extract out of this place? Well, this is already at a place where if you double jumped, you could probably get there. Like I just thought of that later. Then from there I went, well, you know what? If we do that, then that means that we can use that as a way to sort of create a sense of progression by coming back here, which leads to the need of, well, I need something that gets the player to want to come back here. And then that means that there's an opportunity for, oh, well, if there's an opportunity for that, then that means that I could make it so that this fly is like super annoying. And one of the ways I can make that fly even more annoying is by making this platform tiny. And so now there's like this sense of progression of like terrible, annoying fly. And then, oh, you know what? Actually, I decided I want this to have 2 HP. Because now that I've thought through all that stuff in a more holistic way, I'm thinking I'd rather you two-shot it early on, and it's a bit annoying, but then as soon as you get basically any nail upgrade, you can come back and one-shot it. So it trivializes the fly in that sense. And I'm fine with that because you still don't get the reward for the double jump. You still get rewarded for the double jump, so that's still being accomplished. But at least you trivialize the fly encounter by easily killing it. And you still want the thing. That's good. It's just a matter of you know, justifying everything later. Like, it was a completely arbitrary. And if I decided I didn't like the platforming, if that double jump thing had not worked out as an idea, then we would have just changed the location of the platform. No problem. Whatever. But you can take that, illustrate all these things, and be like, well, in what way would this example of gameplay be illustrative of a higher level thing? Like, how could we define that at a higher level such that it becomes kind of a rule for design? The rules for design are that you have platforming challenges plus combat challenges. This actually is plus an exploration challenge, probably. Well, this part of it is an exploration platforming challenge, at least. So you could also go from low level to high level by taking what you have and then trying to define the constituent elements of it and going, oh, this is like all challenges should be like this one in this way. You can start with examples and then build them up. So that's bottom-up design versus top-down design. Bottom-up starts with the small details and works upwards. Top-down starts with the big, broad concepts and then drills down into the specifics. High level to low level versus low level to high level.
Mhm.
So this is how you want to approach, because at the end of the day, you need all of it to make sense together. But where you start isn't super important. So for the rest of this morning, we're going to just write. We're going to just write. Everybody's going to pick a game that exists, choose a single player game, and you're going to go through this process, but with that game. So first step. So what I want at the end of the time, I'm going to give you some time, and what I want at the end of it is you're just going to produce what the gameplay pillars of that game are, not the high level pillars. Well, let's say high level pillars and gameplay pillars. So identify the high level pillars, but then identify only the gameplay pillars. You don't have to do the rest of just those two things. And then come up with an example from the game that highlights those gameplay pillars, that shows off those gameplay pillars in action.
Okay.
Make
Yeah.
sense?
Mhm.
I'm going to give you a bunch of time for this. You're going to need some time. Let's say let's do 45 minutes, and then we can spend the last half hour talking about them. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay, I'll be here. Good luck.